I'm wondering what's the significance or why it matters, the difference between transubstantiation and consubstantiation, since like they both, from my understanding, contain the spiritual aspect of Christ, and in transubstantiation, the matter doesn't change, but this underneath it. I'm just kind of wondering what the real difference is and why it matters.
Okay, I'm glad you asked. So in transubstantiation, the outward appearances of bread and wine remain the same, but the inward reality changes to the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And the way to capture this, think about yourself. You have a certain height and weight, hair color, location, all those things. Those are these incidental details about how you are. But underneath all those hows is a who, and that who you are is your substance. So if you lost weight, got a new haircut, grew 2 inches, moved to Nebraska, you would still be you. Even though you'd have all of the factoids about you would be different, the reality of you would endure. That makes sense so far?
Yes.
So usually the substance, the underlying reality stays the same and the externals change. But here, the external appearances remain the same and the underlying reality changes. That's the kind of inversion. And so it continues to look like bread and wine, but when Jesus declares, "This is my body, this is my blood," we believe it really is his body and really is his blood. Now, as for the view you call consubstantiation, are you thinking of like the Lutheran view?
Yes.
Okay, so the Lutheran view is that Christ is in, with, and under the bread and wine, but he's bodily present in some way. There's 2 problems with this. One is the Eucharist the bread and wine don't become Jesus. Jesus just cohabits with the bread and wine. And so we do worship the Eucharist, and a Lutheran wouldn't offer worship to the Eucharist. But also, it doesn't make sense from a logical perspective, by which I mean we can understand how God can be fully God and fully man because there's nothing in divinity or manhood that is contradictory. They're different, but they're not contradictory. Just like something could be a red triangle, it could be 100% red and 100% triangular. But it couldn't be 100% red and 100% blue because those 2 descriptions actually clash. So the Eucharist can be fully God, fully man, and all of the outward appearances can look like bread and wine, but the inward reality is 100% Christ. But if you say it's both 100% bread and 100% Jesus, that doesn't make sense. Because there that's like saying 100% red and 100% blue. Because now you're claiming 2 different realities, that his humanity and bread are coexisting in such a way that philosophically and logically they just can't coexist. And so you can run into this problem where you don't want to say on the one hand that Jesus becomes fully God, fully man, fully bread. That would be a heresy called impanation, and Lutherans would deny this. But if you say that's not what's happening, it's not clear what you're saying is happening. What does it mean to say that it is bodily Jesus and not bodily Jesus at the same time and same place? That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that they won't offer worship to the Eucharist shows the significance of the difference and the problems of the contradictory modes of presence is the kind of philosophical problem with it. I would readily say that outside of the Catholic view, the Lutheran view is the strongest and probably highest kind of Eucharistic theology. I mean, Orthodox don't use the word transubstantiation often, but they believe basically the same thing we do. That would be the highest. But there we just agree. We're just using different language. The Lutheran view is a much richer understanding of Christ's presence than you'll find in other forms of Protestantism, but it isn't high enough, and it doesn't hold together well enough. The other problem is that, at least traditionally, the Lutheran view is that Christ is present during the liturgy. So in a Lutheran service, then Christ is present and with and under the bread and wine, and then he stops being present after. But then you go back and read, for instance, Justin Martyr writing in the 2nd century, and he talks about how they would bring the Eucharist to the sick. And we know from examples like St. Tarsicius in the early church that this was a common practice. Well, traditionally, Lutherans won't bring communion to the sick because they don't believe Christ is present there anymore. So this is just kind of a red flag that their views on Eucharistic theology are not, in fact, what the early Christians believed.
Okay.
All right. Justin, thank you very much. That does bring us to the break. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything on the Eucharist today with Joe Hescmeyer, our guest on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title Second Apostle of Germany.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
The Dutch-born Jesuit St. Peter Canisius was one of the key figures in restoring the Catholic faith in Germany during the Protestant Reformation. He is renowned for his catechism and also for his founding more than 40 universities that proved bastions of Catholicism across Central Europe. He died in 1597 and was named a doctor in 1925.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
Joe Hescmeyer, our guest today on Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and look at that, 3 lines open right now. That doesn't usually happen when we're having an Ask Me Anything, and it's Ask Me Anything about the Eucharist today. If you've got questions about the Eucharist, whether you know a lot or a little, whether you're Catholic or not Catholic, 888-318-7884. Joe Hescmeyer is the podcaster behind Shameless Popery, growing by leaps and bounds, constantly growing because new people are discovering just how much great stuff there is, how much great Catholic stuff there is, helpful stuff, stuff that will really help you to understand your faith and to live your faith and, God willing, share your faith with other people. Tell us a little bit what's going on at Shameless Popery, Joe.
Yeah, so tomorrow I have an episode. For those who may have seen it, Dr. Gavin Ortland recently made a video called The Papacy is Not from God. And as you might imagine, I don't think that is correct. I wrote a book called Pope Peter, arguing the opposite. And one of the arguments he makes is that there was no Bishop of Rome until sometime in the 2nd century. And I think there's a decent wealth of evidence that points to the opposite. So I try to lay that case out. So I hope you tune in tomorrow. I know we released it early for donors over on my Patreon, shamelessjoe.com, and it's been well received so far. So I'm very excited to see what people have to say.
That's your wheelhouse too, right? That first 200 years.
I love the first 200 years. I find it just super fascinating, and so it's a lot of fun to kind of look at what did these early Christians say. And I think the popular imagination of like everything was just chaotic and no one really knew what Christianity really stood for and everybody was worshiping just, kind of freewheeling and all that. And then you go back and read it and you're like, no, this is incredibly structured. And they're very clear what they believe and what they don't believe. And they're standing up to heresies and, they're doing all this stuff. It's quite remarkable.
It's weird to think that Jesus spent 3 years structuring the thing and that the structure persisted. Like you see it in the Gospels. He's literally calling certain people to be the leaders of this thing. He's filling them with all these glorious powers and I almost said privileges, but I don't mean that to be understood
burdens,
wrongly.
Really, but yeah.
Right. He's placing this whole thing on them. Communities former, you see it all in the New Testament, and then you go, what? That it was just chaos after that? That Jesus was such a terrible organizer, he just couldn't get it straight?
It's one of the things I like to sometimes ask Protestants who I'm interacting with, depending on where they're coming from, like what their model of the church is. Like if you're a Presbyterian or you're a Congregationalist in your view of church governance, is it your belief that Jesus set up that view, or he didn't care? Like he just doesn't care what the structure of the church is. What is it you actually think happened? And if he wanted, say a democracy, like you find in some denominations where the people choose their leadership, why didn't he just do that? It's not like they'd never heard of democracy. Besides him being God,
Right.
there had also been plenty of Roman or Greek experiments with democracy. They hadn't turned out super well, but if democracy is a thing that they should have been striving for, pretty weird that he chooses a kingdom and says the kingdom of God throughout, and then chooses this, top-down leadership structure. Why did he give Peter authority if he didn't want it to continue past, all of these questions?
Well,
the burden's often put on the Catholic side of how do you know this continued after the first century? I think there are good answers to that, but it's worth asking, well, if you think some other model is what he meant for every subsequent century, why didn't he mention that?
Yeah, right.
And why didn't he set up the church to look like that?
Right. Jesus wanted an egalitarian church where it was this kind of decentralized and disorganized. And the way that he ensured that was he created a centralized governing body for it. It doesn't,
right.
Like, what do you think he's doing?
And then he talks about the 12, judging the 12 tribes of Israel into eternity in Luke 22, where it's like, well, that doesn't sound that fleeting. That doesn't sound like we're going to start it this way and then 20 years from now we're going to switch it.
888-318-7884, the number. You want to ask about the Eucharist? What was Jesus' intention for the Eucharist? How does the church understand the Eucharist? Whatever your Eucharist, what does the Scripture say about the Eucharist? Whatever it is, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Going to Fort Worth, Texas, where Joseph is listening on 910 a.m. Joseph, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Oh, hello. Thanks for having me. My kids go to Orthodox school, and they're going to their first Divine Liturgy, and they were going to give them blessed bread. I think it's called antiteron. Mm-hmm. And I guess I have two questions. First of all, can they receive antiteron? And secondly, what if it's given in lieu of the Eucharist at the time the Orthodox people are receiving the Eucharist? And those are my two questions.
Yeah, that's great. So, admittedly, I don't have a ton of exposure with it. And when I have received it, it's been at Catholic Byzantine liturgies where there's not a question surrounding it. But so the ante is instead of doron is gifts. And so you take the bread, and some of it you consecrate and use for the Eucharist, and some of it you consecrate and don't use for the Eucharist. And so this was a way of being able to partake in something if you weren't able to receive the Eucharist. Or sometimes you'll have people, even if they are receiving the Eucharist, they'll receive this afterwards as a way of purifying themselves. So if you think about what the priest does after, this is in the Mass as well as in the Divine Liturgy, there's what's called the purification of the vessels afterwards, where you pour water into the chalice and so on, or depending on the rite, maybe wine and water into the chalice. And so there's a liturgical purification. So there is a sense of purifying your body, not purifying in the sense of like morally impure, but purifying in the sense of like undivided, that you've just received something divine. And so you need some kind of sort of, the word I'm looking for is something like let down. Like if you run a marathon, people will like jog afterwards so they don't go from, running to just nothing. Or, you sprint and then you sort of slow down. Some kind of off-ramp, because you've just received God in your body. So you don't want the next thing to be like a Five Guys burger. No offense to Five Guys. Like you need some kind of in-between step there. And so a sort of step down is the antiteron, that you have the blessed bread that isn't consecrated. It hasn't become the Eucharist. It's just been blessed by the church. But this is also something that the Orthodox will give to those who are not able to receive communion because they're not part of the Orthodox. So as far as I'm aware, and I would invite any callers who may be Eastern Catholic or Eastern Orthodox who know more about this, this is, number one, not a sign that you're in full communion with the Orthodox Church, because non-Orthodox receive. And number two, not something that would be inappropriate to receive as a Catholic. I think you would be not only in good standing as a Catholic to receive this, but I think it is almost expected.
Okay.
So that's my understanding. And I would invite, you can always ask your daughter's teachers if there's anything else you should know as well, just so that we're respecting both churches' kind of norms around this.
And even if it's given at the time of when the Orthodox people are receiving the Eucharist, the Catholics could receive it?
So it would be not receiving the Eucharist, they would be receiving the antiteron. Now, technically,
yeah, exactly.
Even in terms of Catholics receiving the Orthodox Eucharist, we believe it's a valid Eucharist. And so we have much more permissive rules about receiving the Eucharist in an Orthodox divine liturgy than we do, say, going to like a Protestant church where you wouldn't receive there. But out of respect for the Orthodox side, we would say defer to what their church does in terms of its Eucharistic practice.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, Joseph. We're going to Murray, Kentucky now, where Austin is watching on YouTube. Austin, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Joe Hescmeyer.
Yes, sir. Joe, I need to watch your video on Dilexi Te. I need to read it still, but I do need to watch your video on it.
All right. That's a good encouragement for anyone else who may be listening. I really liked Dilexi Te. I found it challenging in a good way.
Where would somebody go if they wanted to watch your video on Dilexi Te, the new letter from Pope Leo?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned what it was, because we were just jumping right into
you guys just assuming everybody knows what these two Latin words are.
Yes, you would find that over at Shameless Popery, and it's just called "Why I'm Jazzed About Pope Leo's First Apostolic Exhortation," and I put it up 4 days ago, and yeah, it's me being excited about Pope Leo, building on a document Pope Francis had drafted, challenging us on how effectively we're loving the poor and serving the poor. And I think it's a good reminder that we can do all the right things in terms of having the faith, but if we don't serve the least of these, we're going to be in trouble.
Wait, what does that mean? We're going to be in trouble? Like our society's going to be in trouble, or we personally are going to be in trouble?
Both and. I mean, the separation of the sheep and goats, when Christ says, whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me.
He meant it?
Yeah, it turns out. So it's one of these things when you read like the Church Fathers on this, it's tremendously clear that this is something we need to be taking more seriously than we often take.
Austin, we didn't get to your question. We got to your assertion that you're going to watch, that you like Joe's video, but we didn't get to your question. So if you'll hang on, we'll get to it right after a very quick message. Catholic Answers Live.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Hescmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
What is the Catholic Church? Everyone seems to have an opinion, but the Church never quite fits into the boxes people make for it. In The Faith Unboxed, author Andrew Petiprin looks at some of the most common boxes people put the Catholic Church in and explains why they don't fit. In doing so, he brings us closer to what the Church really is, the institution founded by Christ. Order The Faith Unboxed today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Joe Hescmeyer is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything about the Eucharist, and Austin is in Murray, Kansas, watching on YouTube, and he did it himself. He started talking about a video that he was watching on Joe's YouTube site, and so we never got to his question before the break. Austin, you still have a question, or have you worked it out yourself?
Yes.
Oh, you do?
One correction, it's Murray, Kentucky, but
Wait, what did I say? What did I say?
Murray, Kansas.
Yeah, of course I did, because that's just how I roll. Sorry, Austin. I'm going to give you a free book to make up for it, because now to demote somebody to Kansas from Kentucky is wrong.
Can I mute the host? I don't know how to do this.
I apologize for that, Austin. Murray, Kentucky. Yep. You'll get a free book at the end of this, but go ahead with your question.
But so, I just converted this year into the church, and one of the many things of the Catholic faith that got me to here today is the Eucharist and what it is and what it isn't, and miracles, and even backed up by science. How can people still refute that? And a little side note to it, we have a priest in our diocese that was there at the one in India, a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we actually had a priest in our diocese who was responsible. Well, he was involved in a Eucharistic miracle. He will protest that he wasn't responsible for it. He was a newly ordained priest, and he was very nervous saying Mass early on. And one day he went to turn the page, and his hand was kind of shaky, and he knocked the chalice over after the consecration, and spilled the precious blood on the corporal and everything else. And so they gathered everything else to take it to go be purified. And when they unfolded everything, there was no stain at all. Which, if you've ever spilled red wine, even unconsecrated, you know that is not how that normally works on white linens. So there was just this incredible miracle, and he was fairly quiet about it. I heard about it through other people, and then asked him about it. I said, "You performed a Eucharistic miracle?" And he said, "No, I spilled a chalice." And I thought that was a very humble kind of answer. But yeah, you find enough of these things where even if you say, what I always say is, look, if 99% of miracles are fake and 1% are real, atheism's disproved. And similarly, if 99% of Eucharistic miracles are fake and 1% are real, then every form of Protestantism that denies the Eucharist is disproved. And you've certainly narrowed down the number of contenders to a pretty small handful. And the fact that in the Catholic Church you find these Eucharistic miracles so consistently, it certainly seems to me to be a strong case for them being real. Now, the thing that makes it tricky as an argument is each individual one. The Church will rarely just say, like, yep, this is definitely a miracle. It's much more likely the Church will either say, we're looking into it, or this is approved for, devotion. But we can't prove it's a miracle, right? Like, how do you go about proving it is a miracle? But we can come to a reasonable certainty that these things are miraculous, which again, all in the nature of miracles aiding faith rather than replacing them.
What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty sound.
Are you just spending all this time thinking about which free book you're going to get? Is that what you're...
I'd be lying, but...
All right, well...
you guys have good books. I can't help it.
Yeah, Joe has really good books. So I'll tell you what, you just hang on and talk to Edgar. Edgar will give you any Joe Hescmeyer title that we've got in our catalog. Maybe the Eucharist is really Jesus, Pope Peter, the early church was the Catholic Church. What else is in our catalog, Joe? You don't remember your own books. All right.
No, those are the three.
Those are the three?
Early Church is the Catholic Church, the Eucharist is really Jesus, Pope Peter. I mean, I did some other stuff, like I did a 20 Answers guide, but you're going to
get one of those three. Okay, so when's your next book for Catholic Answers coming out?
Tell my kids to stop needing attention.
I will speak to them. I'll be like, children, you are depriving the world of another Joe Hescmeyer book.
No, honestly, between the podcast and parenting and everything, my book writing pace has slowed down considerably. But yeah. I've got hopes. I've got hopes for a couple other ideas I've been working on.
You've also got lovely kids, so
I do. Yeah. I'm very pleased with how they're turning out. I give most of the credit there to my wife and God's grace, but we were listening. I was praying morning prayer in the car. Shout out the Sing the Hours podcast does a fantastic job of daily liturgy of the hours, and my 5 and 4-year-old were both like, we were praying along with you, and that was like a great as a dad, that's the kind of stuff you like to hear.
That is beautiful. All right, let's get you another call. If you're not going to write books, we got to get you to answer questions here on the air. Michael in Hinton, West Virginia. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. You got a question for Joe?
I do. So my question is, I've read some stuff about the Church Fathers, their writings, and I know that they did have a belief in the real presence in the Eucharist. My question is, at what point, or do we know, at what point outside of the Mass was the Eucharist? When did they begin to reserve it and worship it the way we do in adoration and the tabernacle and stuff like that?
Okay.
Outside of just the actual act of communion.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a kind of complicated story because you find them reserving the Eucharist early on. So, I mentioned before, Justin Martyr talks about them bringing the Eucharist to those who are absent, the sick and those unable to attend. This is in about 160 in First Apology. We also have early evidence of the monks in the desert or, the solitaries in the desert reserving the Eucharist in their home or in their cell and being able to receive communion that way, where those who are, not priests would receive Eucharist for a week or however long so that they're able to receive communion without kind of leaving the isolation of their cell. There is, I guess First Council of Nicaea seems to kind of allude to this practice, but it's later on, I think the 7th century, that you first start having things like what we think of as a tabernacle in terms of the location in the church for the Eucharist to be reserved. And a lot of this is just out of a sense that we want a common place rather than preserving the Eucharist in someone's home. It'd be better to preserve the Eucharist somewhere safe, but also somewhere where everyone can come to be with our Lord. And then from there, you get things that, Corpus Christi happens later on and in the Middle Ages. So you have sort of a development in terms of what the practice looks like of how we offer that kind of worship to our Lord. But you can see the roots of it in the preservation of the host as far back as the 100s.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Michael, thank you very much. This is nice to say. The Eucharist has got a lot of callers. The lines have been staying full. Thank you very much to the callers. By the way, now Michael just left, so we got one line open. If you're not Catholic and you're interested in what Catholics teach about the Eucharist, 888-318-7884. Anybody can call today. Let's go to Christine down in Tallahassee, Florida, watching on YouTube. Christine, welcome. Got a question for Joe?
Hello?
Yep. Oh, you don't sound like a Christine.
This does not sound... Joe?
Oh, no. Yes, my name is Christine from Tallahassee.
Nailed it.
Wait, I think what happened is somebody hung up, and then So have you even spoken to the call screener yet?
I have, yes. Edgar, the bomb. He's the goat.
So
of call screeners.
What's your name?
You're being very generous to someone who may have put your name in the doc as
Christine. But well, let's ask you this: are you in Florida?
No, I'm not, but I am. I was born in Florida. How about that?
That's not helpful at all. We're not going back to your birth certificate. All right. So who are you and where are you?
This is John from Oklahoma.
Of course it is, John. I should have recognized your voice, John from Oklahoma. All right, go ahead.
Okay, here's my question. Now, I'm starting to get into Martin Luther and stuff like that, but I don't believe it was his intent for people to totally disregard the Eucharist as well as Mary. My question is, at what point in the Protestant followers, I guess, because it's not that old, at what point did they just say, hey, we're done with Mary, we're done with the Eucharist? And, why did they decide to do that when that wasn't Martin Luther's actual intent for people to get away from that? Because he still, even after his letters, he still believed in all that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. He starts to cast doubt on Eucharistic theology and on Mary, even though he continues to have a high view of both. So we see a change within him and his views on these. Although you're right that he is not, what we would normally think of as a Protestant view. If you're, let's caveat that. If you're from a part of the country that's heavily Lutheran, it's going to look more like Luther's views. If you're from a part of the country like Oklahoma or Florida, that's not heavily Lutheran, you're more likely to find people from what are sometimes called lower church theologies, where they have a lower Eucharistic theology as well. This happens very quickly after Luther launches the Reformation, as in like a couple of years later. You get Ulrich Zwingli, who is one of the major Swiss reformers, and he has a much more just symbolic view. And so in 1529, there's the Marburg Colloquy, in which Luther and Zwingli they want to ally so they can fight against Catholics together, but it turns out they can't agree on Eucharistic theology. Like, this is the biggest area of disagreement that they have, and they ultimately just part company. And Protestantism has never been able to resolve this split. I mean, this is one of the recurring themes within Protestantism. Like, look, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, whoever you are, there will be times where there's a disagreement that arises. What Catholicism is quite unusual in is that these disagreements often get resolved. Now, they may not be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Somebody wins, somebody loses, but there's an actual resolution. You go back in the history of the early church and you can find things like Donatism and the rest. These things rise up, they're dealt with, they die out. But in the case of Lutheranism, there are these new wounds to the unity of the body of Christ, and these wounds never heal. That there's no mechanism by which they can be resolved. And so you have side by side these people saying, no, Christ is in with and under the bread and wine. And then you have these Reformed people who say Christ is spiritually present somehow. There's in the Eucharist or in the Lord's Supper a reference to Christ, but we don't know exactly how to define that. And then you have the purely symbolic view that this simply represents Christ and he is not present in the bread and wine at all. So these views pop up, and all of them still exist today. And all of that happens pretty quickly after the Reformation. And I think as a Catholic, it's fair to say this looks like you have a method problem. Like, if you don't have a way of resolving problems, and over again these problems pop up, and then 500 years later they're all still there, like, what major theological controversies have Protestants solved amongst themselves? I'm not sure I could list any. That seems like a big kind of red flag for the method. So that's the long story long. The 1520s, we start to see much more open attacks on the Eucharist, whereas Luther casts some doubts. People like Zwingli go much further.
Oh, okay. Now that goes into play with Mary also. That they
there's a similar yep, that's right. Things like Mary's sinlessness, even the Assumption, which wasn't a defined dogma, but was still something that was widely believed in. It's the fifth or the fourth glorious mystery of the Rosary. So you have those things, which clearly there was a Catholic sense that Mary had been assumed into heaven, and that starts getting questioned pretty early on because it's not explicitly in the Bible. Those kind of things. So it doesn't take long for all of that to set in. But it is true that, Anglicans and Lutherans are going to have a much higher view of the Eucharist and a much higher view of Mary in many cases, not all, in many cases, than, say, like a non-denominational Baptist evangelical might. And that was true then, and that's true now as well.
All right. Well, awesome. I do appreciate that, and I will just go back to listening here in Tallahassee, Florida.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. I don't know if any of that is allowed anymore. I think fun has been outlawed. I apologize for I don't know if you're allowed to have fun anymore. I don't know if you're allowed to be silly anymore. I think that's possibly against the law here in California. You guys will probably be fine where you are in Missouri, Oklahoma. I'm probably on the verge of being arrested here in California just for participating in this program. Oh, no, I got to take a break, don't I? Sorry, Shelley in Massachusetts. You got to wait just 60 seconds while we do this break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything About the Eucharist with Joe Hescmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with a gospel message. Today, EWTN offers an online learning series, its own YouTube channel, the daily Mass and devotionals, and audio and video on demand. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Not fully up to date on all of our politically correct humor. We will be having classes and workshops for the staff later to get straightened out on that. 888-318-7884 is the number. You are welcome to call if you have questions about the Eucharist. And you don't have to be politically correct. You don't have to be correct in any way. If you have a question, we'd like to get you an answer. If it's a simple question, fine. If it's a complicated question, fine. If it's a controversial question, that's fine as well. We love talking about Jesus in the Eucharist. We get to do it for 2 hours today. Your call makes all the difference, so go ahead and call. 888-318-7884. Shelley in Massachusetts, though, I didn't get to her before the break, so I better get to her now. Listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for waiting.
No problem. I appreciate you taking the call. So I, in my prayers over the last 7 years, there was something that was stirring in me, and I didn't know what it was. And in this stirring, it was always, it's not here yet, it's not here yet. And I felt like it was a 7-year thing. I don't know why. At about 7 year, which is this year, all of a sudden I felt, now it's soon, you need to do something. But I didn't know what it was. So I asked for a sign, something that was clear to me. Well, the next week, I was at a bake sale at church, and a woman who I don't know, it's a church that's new to me, so I don't know everybody, was talking to me, and she said, you know, I need to ask you something. Would you be willing to be what do they call it, extraordinary Eucharistic minister? Okay. I know there's a difference.
Sure.
And I said, oh, my God, this is my clear sign. You wouldn't believe I just prayed to have an answer. So I'm going to go through the training. And my question is, in addition to the training that I'll get from church, what else do you recommend I do to prepare myself? Because it feels to me like this is a really big deal.
Yeah,
Very
beautiful.
I think that's
beautiful.
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad you're taking it that seriously. I hope that everyone who is an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion does the same. Because you are bringing Jesus to people. And so I would say first, be as spiritually pure as you can. If that means going to confession beforehand, that's wonderful. And the same way that you would prepare yourself to go up to receive communion yourself, to be someone who administers the sacrament, you want to be a faithful conduit of that encounter, of that meeting between Jesus and the people for whom you're bringing our Lord. Second, I think you should get in the practice as you can of praying for the people that you're going to be. So maybe it's the night before, maybe it's the morning of. Just be in the habit of saying an intentional prayer for those you're going to encounter. And maybe, if you have a regular cycle, my parents bring communion to those at a particular nursing home, and they know the people there. And so they can pray for them in a very intentional sort of way. You might have that relationship that develops as well. So taking them on as someone that you pray for, because this is someone you've formed this incredibly meaningful encounter with, because you've been brought into this very special relationship. So I think if you do that, if you focus on being a spiritually pure conduit, if you focus on being someone who brings them to Jesus in prayer, and brings Jesus to them in the Eucharist, that you'll be doing well.
What do you think, Shelley? Is that helpful?
Thank you so much. That's super helpful, really helpful.
Okay.
And I hadn't really thought. I mean, I thought about being the vessel, right, and looking people in the eye as I pass it. The gift that I might be able to bring Jesus to people who can't come to him is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And I want to be, like you said, as pure as possible. I want to.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is the most important thing I'll probably ever do in my life, besides give birth to my daughter.
Beautiful. And yeah, I think the reverence with which you approach our Lord will speak volumes. Like recognizing that you are, as you said, you're a vessel, you're a conduit. This isn't going to be about you. So allowing yourself to sort of recede in the background to allow and kind of facilitate this encounter it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to do that.
Shelley, I would like to give you two things. One of them is my recommendation, and I think Joe will support me on this. You could read the first homily of Pope Leo the day after he became Pope. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I love Pope Leo's first homily. Yes.
Yeah, and it's about how the priest has to disappear so that Christ can shine through. And that might just inspire you, because it seems like that's where you're going. That's where your soul is being led. So I recommend you read Pope Leo's first homily to the cardinals the day after he was elected. You can get it at Vatican.va. The second thing is I want to send you a book called The Eucharist is Really Jesus by Joe Hescmeyer, and I think you will. I think you'll be very happy when you get that book. It's a very, very fine one. It's actually it's been inspiring to me to listen to the way you are approaching this, Shelley.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful, and I think you are right on the money about the importance of the act of sharing the Eucharist with others. So God bless you in your new ministry. And in your preparation for that new ministry. If you just hang on and give us an address, we'll send you The Eucharist is Really Jesus. On to Lansing, Michigan, I go, where Chris is watching on YouTube. Chris, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi.
Hi.
Big fan of the show.
Thank
Not a big fan of the Chiefs. Sorry, Joe. Lions fan team. But my question was about.
Oh no, I'm happy to talk about that if you want to.
No, we're not talking about the Chiefs and the Lions. We're not.
Hey, I would like to, but hey.
The Lions haven't lost that hard since the Christian martyrs.
Oh, don't do that to me, Joe. Come on.
Oh, man.
No, my question was about how I can relate to somebody in my life who is a evangelical, and when I bring up John 6, they'll say, "Oh, that's just your interpretation of it." And so what are the best earlier church historical documents that point us to this outside of St. Ignatius of Antioch? Because they'll be like, well, that's one guy's opinion. Is there a greater expanse of evidence that I could tap into that you know?
There is. The first thing, we definitely need to send you The Eucharist is Really Jesus. I'd also like to send you, if I may send you, two books, despite your bad football opinions. The early church was the Catholic Church. I have a chapter in there on views on the Eucharist in the first 200 years. And I think those two things are going to show pretty definitively that you can't pull that move. You can't just claim, oh yeah, that's just one guy's opinion. Partly because in the case of Ignatius, if you say, yeah, this guy was a student of the Apostle John, and I'm not, and we read John 6 differently, and he had the chance to talk to the Apostle John about John 6, I don't think our opinions are equally valid. I don't think our opinions are equally well informed, because I'm just reading the book report, and he knew the author. And so I think that's a huge red flag that, but in any case, you want to add to that things like Justin Martyr in First Apology in the year 160, when he's talking about the Eucharist, he talks about that it's no longer common bread and wine, but becomes the body and blood of Jesus. You talk about the Eucharistic sacrifice being present in things like the Didache in the first century, or in the writings of Irenaeus in 180. There's all of these really incredible things like I said, in the early church was the Catholic Church. I look at the first 200 years, but you can go on and find testimony after testimony of just such obvious declarations that it is no longer bread and wine, it's now the body and blood of our Lord. And people like, Cyril of Jerusalem in the 300s talks about this. Ambrose of Milan talks about this. And Gregory of Nyssa has this really incredible series in Great Catechism that I go into in The Eucharist is Really Jesus. And again, in the 300s there, where he talks about how we become transformed into the blood of Christ by receiving the body and blood of Christ. And this matches up with 1 Corinthians 10, where St. Paul talks about all of this, that we become the body of Christ because we all partake of the one loaf. All of that kind of stuff taken together, it's not just you and I reading a chapter of text and reading it in different ways. There's this huge wealth of biblical data and also data from the early church that all points in the exact same direction, that it is completely on the Catholic side of this.
Chris, what a wonderful call. Thank you. And Joe, clearly overcompensating, sending you 2 books because your football team defeated his football team. Hang on, if you give us...
No, other way around. Let's be very clear.
I was thinking of the Super Bowl. I'm so sorry, Joe. I apologize. I was stuck on the major game. You were... hang on, we're going to send you The Eucharist is Really Jesus, and the early church was the Catholic Church. What we need from you is an address there in Lansing, Michigan. Chris, coming right back. If you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't called, you're welcome to 888-318-7884. Okay, welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Two major mistakes last hour. I got to correct them. They were not Joe Hescmeyer. They were not deep theological mistakes. I called Kentucky, Kansas, and I said that the Detroit Lions won the Super Bowl last year. Those are major.
Quick fact check. When did the Detroit Lions last win a Super Bowl?
I love that we both say Detroit. Like
I did because you did. I really
like we're from there or something. No, everyone. That's one of those weird cities where the people from the city say the name of it different than everybody else says it. We all know it's wrong? Detroit. Yeah, like they pronounce their own city wrong. Yeah.
Now, if you want to insult Kentucky a second time, mention Louisville.
Why? What do they say about Louisville?
It should be Louisville or Louisville. If you want to be sort of French, Louisville. Come on. How many letters are we dropping?
You know what? I've thought about it, and I don't want to insult Kentucky. I'm going to just go with no. I don't want to do that. I made two major mistakes the first hour. You were answering hard theological and historical questions. No mistakes. I was just hosting a radio show. Two major mistakes.
Just geographic ones. Yeah.
No, I mean, you feel bad because the answer to your question about the Detroit Lions is never. They've never even been to a Super Bowl.
The only NFL team that's been around the entire time there's been a Super Bowl and has never attended the Super Bowl, or at least never won it. I can't remember they've attended it.
No, and if anybody deserves it, it's the people of Detroit. You know, like they're out in the snow fighting their way through the wintry tundra to get to that stadium, and
they've looked great lately. They've looked great the last few years, but they can't quite get over a little hump we call Patrick Mahomes. Anyway,
that's not the hump they can't get over.
Or winning playoff games.
They're not having. Oh man. Okay.
It's going to become a very different show if we don't get it back on track real fast.
Welcome to Catholic Sports Talk Radio, where we're not even sure which city these teams are in. 888-318-7884, the number. Call and ask about your team. Actually, let's go back to talking about the Eucharist. Joe Hescmeyer is the author of the book, The Eucharist is Really Jesus. He's a shameless papist, and he has a podcast called Shameless Popery, which has, I don't even know how many people subscribe to it now. It went from 0 to like so many in such a short time. That's I'm also not good at statistics. It's just piling up my shortcomings as a host. Shall we go back
to... You have many other positive qualities.
You sound like my mom. I know you're not good at football or socializing with people, but you have lots of positive qualities. Thanks, Mom. I'm going to get out there and fight like a tiger. All right, Charlie's in Burlington, North Carolina, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Charlie, with your question.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my call. I'm currently a member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and I'm in OCIA class currently.
Wonderful.
And I was wondering thank you, with myself and my wife.
Beautiful.
What would you say are, I have a pretty good understanding, but what would you say are the main differences between the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and the Catholic Church? And yes, to go on Joe's point that he said earlier, looking at Martin Luther and the Reformation and the Eucharist versus the other reformers is one of the things that kind of got me down the rabbit trail of looking into Catholicism.
Oh, glory. Well, what's tricky a little bit with trying to describe the difference is that there is enough diversity within Lutheran theology that I want to make sure that I'm being fair to it. Luther left the question of whether you worship the Eucharist up to the individual believer. He said, and this, you can actually find, this is the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod, but they have a section called Luther and the Adoration of the Sacrament, in which they quote him as saying, I really think it would be better to follow the example of the apostles and not worship than to follow our custom and worship. Not that adoration is wrong, but simply because there is less danger in not adoring than in adoring. So he wasn't sure if we should worship Jesus in the Eucharist and sort of thought we should default to not worshiping. That's obviously a huge difference that we would say, no, like if the apostles didn't worship Jesus in the Eucharist at the Last Supper, it's because of their confusion about both the Eucharist and about Jesus. That there's some progress where they seem to come to the place where they're able to say, my Lord and my God, but it's not right away. So trying to get back to a place of having incomplete knowledge about Jesus isn't actually the goal of the Christian life. We have the fuller picture now. We understand better what is happening in the Eucharist and what is happening at the Last Supper in light of the full revelation God has given us. So without having to speculate about what the apostles thought was going on, they were probably confused about a fair number of things going on in Holy Week. But that doesn't mean that that's kind of the model. So I think Luther was wrong about that. Second, as I mentioned before, and actually the first, I'm blanking on his name, one of the first major figures in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod wrote a journal article a long while back about not bringing the Eucharist to the sick. And so that's obviously going to be a major red flag that when you go back and read the early Christian writings of people like St. Justin Martyr, they are bringing communion to the sick. Lutherans aren't. This exposes that deeper issue. I mentioned this at the top of the last hour, which is the Lutheran view classically is that Christ is in with and under the bread and wine during the liturgy, but ceases to be present after the liturgy. Now, there's also a whole other dimension I haven't even talked about, which is the sacrificial theology. The early Christians were very clear that the Mass is a sacrifice, and Luther's antipathy towards the Mass as a good work and sacrifice is pretty well documented. He talks about this quite a bit, and he has extremely strong language about rejecting this view. But even he has to acknowledge that basically the entirety of Christian history stands against him and says, no, the Mass is. The language of the canon of the Mass talks about the oblations and the gifts and the offerings, and it's very clear, this classic understanding, but this goes back even to the New Testament itself. In 1 Corinthians 10, when St. Paul wants to explain how it is we're able to receive Christ in the Eucharist, he explains it by comparing it to the sacrifices offered in Judaism and paganism. And he says things like, consider the practice of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices partners in the altar? Well, why bring that up in the Eucharistic context? Unless he's telling you we're able to unite with Christ because we eat the sacrifice and therefore become a partner in the altar. And that's why he says you cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. This is all the language of sacrifice and of altars. So I would recommend 1 Corinthians 10 is clearly pointing to the Eucharist as sacrifice. If you want, I did a debate with James White on the Eucharist as sacrifice, which is on a channel called Apologetic Dog. And I also did a sit down on the Catholic Catechumens channel with a Lutheran seminarian looking specifically at the Catholic and Lutheran views on the sacrificial nature of the Mass in both views. So I would say those are big issues. And on those, it's not hard to defend the Catholic case using both Scripture and the earliest Christian evidence. Does that help at all?
Okay. Oh yes, and just at least from my research, I'm totally on board with the Catholic viewpoint of the Eucharist, and I've watched that debate between you and James White and a couple of other things. But I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing any of the major points between the differences between Lutheranism and Roman Catholicism. Catholicism.
Great. Well, I'm glad you asked. That's wonderful.
Which book shall we send, Charlie?
Oh yeah. Do you want The Eucharist is Really Jesus?
No, he does not.
I don't think I have that one. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. That might have some helpful info.
What'd you get?
Yeah, I just got your book, which I was planning to start reading. Is the Peter or Pope Peter?
Yeah,
Pope Peter.
I got that one, so that's my next one on the list. So, but yes, I'll add that to the queue. Thank you.
All right, hang on. We're gonna just give us an address. We'll send you The Eucharist is Really Jesus. Charlie, you gave me hope there for just a minute that someone was going to say, no, I don't want a Joe Hescmeyer book. But then in the end, you were just thinking. I thought he was going to
I will send all of his books and the money from his wallet.
Yeah, I would do that. To hear somebody go, no, thanks. I don't want a Joe Hescmeyer book. Charlie, thank you very much. As I said, we just needed an address from you. All lines full except one now, 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
There is tremendous power in prayer because when we acknowledge that we don't have the power, but God does, things then begin to move for our good. Remember Matthew 19:26. But Jesus looked at them and said to them, "With men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." Now that's power.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Joe Hescmeyer, our guest. Every line, again, except one open. We're talking about the Eucharist, 888-318-7884. You don't have to be Catholic to call. You can
Wait, sorry, did you say every line except one open?
Every line except one is where there's one open. That's what I was trying to say. I can't.
These are similar claims. I just want to make sure I understood.
I can't go back and review what I just said. I'm not using my short-term memory when I'm talking in the microphone. I'm just saying words, and they're
Sometimes
disappearing.
when I begin a sentence, even I don't know where it's going to end.
Yeah, well, I don't know where any of this stuff is going to end. And I'm trying to get ready to read this ad, Joe. Oh, there we go. Now all the lines are full. I don't understand why Carrie is making me read these wild ads. But listen, let me just read some of the verbiage he wrote in this ad. Yo, bro, you hear that? That's the sound of savings waving at you. Grab your board, your shades, and maybe a breakfast burrito because shop.catholic.com just dropped the gnarliest sale ever. Why am I reading an ad as if I'm a 14-year-old skater? Why am I doing that?
I thought he was a surfer. I don't know.
Oh, maybe I was a surfer. Yeah. All right.
Okay. I think something people who don't know Carrie Beck should know is Carrie is a crazy person. And I say that loving
He's a
Carrie.
wonderful person. Yeah.
And so having a crazy person write ad copy is a choice.
I'm
glad we've made that choice.
I'm wondering if he gave a prompt to ChatGPT, like write Cy an ad like he's a surfer from a 1950s movie or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what he did because it actually has the word moondoggy in it, but I'm not going to read that part. What he's trying to communicate here is, by the way, Carrie has seen every band in concert. You say the name of a band, Carrie has seen them in concert.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, all of them. Some of them
Moondoggy?
twice. He's probably right. He probably has seen Moondoggy. Yes. Wait. So what is this ad about?
Good sign of the ad copy.
I can't do it. I'm trying to get to what it says with that. So cruise on over to shop.catholic.com. There's huge deals over there. Huge deals. That's what I was going to say. Shop.catholic.com, dude. Oh, Christine in Tallahassee is back. I rarely have I been as excited to have a caller back on the line. Christine.
If this is Chris in Oklahoma, I'm going to be thrilled.
John in Oklahoma. Christine, is it really you?
Yes.
Oh,
really me.
Thank goodness. Do you know what happened last time when we tried to go to you?
My call dropped.
Yeah, no, but it was a dude, and we were very confused. Another person had crept onto the line. Well, we're glad you're here. You got a question for Joe?
Yes. I have a family member that fell away from the Catholic Church, and I was trying to use the Eucharist as a catalyst to bring him back.
Okay.
But it didn't seem to go very far. So I wanted to see if Joe had any insight on that.
So, okay, I'd start with this, and then I've got some questions for you. When you look at the polling, you remember the famous Pew Research study that found a lot of Catholics didn't believe in the Eucharist? When you actually dug into the data, it turned out a lot of people who call themselves Catholic and never go to church don't believe in the Eucharist. But it also turns out that people who believe in the Eucharist go to church at really high rates, and that people who go to church a lot are way more likely to believe in the Eucharist, which, of course, that makes sense. Like, if I think the Eucharist is just a symbol and it's a nice expression of our common belief in Jesus and it makes us feel nice about each other and that's it, I don't really need to get up early on a Sunday to do that. But if I believe I'm actually encountering our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the flesh, okay, that'll get me out of bed. And so there is this strong correlation between belief in the Eucharist and Mass attendance. And I think that there's kind of a chicken or egg, because if you go to church, you're more likely to hear about the Eucharist. If you believe in the Eucharist, you're more likely to go to church. But it's a positive chicken or egg kind of virtuous cycle. So the first question I have in hearing the kind of prompt you gave is, what does the person you're trying to reach already believe about the Eucharist?
Well, they went to 12 years of Catholic school, and so I'm
I
guessing
wish
they
that
know a
meant
lot about
more in terms of, I think this is an area where it's good to give them information, but you're going to want to do a fair amount of reconnaissance. You're going to want to figure out where they're already at. And so asking about their Eucharistic views can be really important, because the fact that somebody says they're a former Catholic doesn't mean they know any more about the Eucharist than somebody who came from a Protestant background. In some cases, it's worse because they think they know and they don't really know anything. No, that's not always the case, but that is so often the case. So in that Pew Research study I was mentioning, it wasn't just that the people didn't believe in the Eucharist, it's that they couldn't even tell you what the Catholic Church's belief on the Eucharist was. And so it wasn't like they understood the Catholic Church says X, but I reject it. It's that they didn't even realize the Catholic Church didn't just say it was all a symbol. And so if you're talking to somebody in that category, you've got to do a lot more kind of foundational work to explain, oh, no, that's not what we believe in. Here's why. And then you go to John 6 and you go to 1 Corinthians 10 and you go to the Last Supper and you go to Ignatius and you go to all the early church kind of sources and you kind of work with them piece by piece by piece through that. But if it's someone who's like, no, I totally understand and I reject, that's going to be a very different conversation. Another question that can be helpful as you're doing a little bit of reconnaissance is asking them if there's anything they miss about when they practice the faith. And listen for the kind of things that they say. Is it the social aspect? Is it something theological? Is it the relationship with God? All of those things. So often we focus on where do we disagree, but sometimes being reminded of what it is you miss about the church that you left can be sort of tug at the string. And so being able to find that, and that's also often a much more pleasant conversation than saying, look at how much we disagree on X or Y, to say, but it was really nice being able to have this way of worshiping God, wasn't it? And that can work in people's hearts in a different way.
Well, we had a really long conversation today, so it was pretty positive. But I don't want to lose the momentum.
Yeah. Well, another thing you can do. Look, we're going to send you a copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus. You can always pass it along and say, what do you think of this? And then, let that be a sort of gateway for the conversation.
Okay. That sounds good. Sorry, I'm walking with my daughter too.
Oh, that's fine.
All right. Hi to your daughter.
Yeah, we have an interesting policy. It's a pro-child policy here. We don't mind.
Really? She wants to say hi.
Oh yeah, put her on.
Oh, wonderful.
Put her on. If she's got a question, even better.
I don't know if she has a question, but she can say hi.
Sure.
Say hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? What's your name? What grade are you in?
What's your name?
Amber.
Amber.
Hi, Amber.
Well, thank you for calling or for talking with us, Amber.
She's not saying anything else. Sorry.
I thought it was going to be really.
All right.
It was going to be really weird if your daughter was like 40 years old or something. Like, oh. I was like kind of relieved when she was young. All right.
I'm sorry he's insulting your age there.
I don't know, Christine. Last time I talked to her, she was John from Oklahoma.
You're not a man from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Christine, will you hang on and we'll send you the early church? No, wait, what are we sending, Joe? Is that right?
The Eucharist is really Jesus.
The Eucharist is really
it'll
Jesus.
Hopefully be a little bit of an on-ramp to talk about the Eucharist with your fallen away person.
And call back anytime.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much.
All
I
right.
really enjoy listening to you guys.
Oh, thank you, Christine.
Oh, good.
Thank you. We enjoyed talking with you. All right, just give that phone number to Edgar, or not phone number, that address, and you can't send books to a phone number. I'm having trouble today. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm so glad we got to talk to Christine from Tallahassee. That would have left a hole in my day if we had not gotten to talk with her.
Yeah, it would have been kind of a plot hole. I don't know if live shows can have a plot hole like that, where you're just like, oh, they started something and didn't wrap it up.
But that's called not paying it off, and I do it all the time. It's the cardinal rule. Don't do that in radio. You're right, Joe. You're right when you say
Oh, this reminds me of a story. We should get to the next caller, though.
Yeah. Hannah in Gallatin, Tennessee, watching on YouTube. I hope I got all that right, Hannah. I'm not having a good day vocal-wise, but you're very welcome here.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, good. Thank you, Hannah.
That's right. Cool. Yeah, I have a question. It's probably going to be simple for you, Joe, but this is just all because this is all very new to me. But does the Eucharist ever stop becoming Jesus? So once it's turned into Jesus, does it ever, like the bread in the bowl, does it stay Jesus for days if it didn't get eaten? And also, does it have anything to do with, like, the question really revolves around the Eucharistic ministers. As they hold it, does that, like, lose any sort of divinity, I guess, in the bread, since it's not from the priest? And also with the hand, straight to the hand rather than the tongue. So yeah,
these are wonderful questions. Really good.
So first, as long as it remains visibly bread and wine, it is in reality the body and blood of Jesus, which means that it does cease to be the body and blood of Jesus when you metabolize it, when it breaks down in your system and is digested beyond the point it is recognizably bread and wine. Those what were called the species, when they are gone, that's where the presence of Christ in that way ceases. And it's funny because there's a way you could ask that about, like, a lot of miracles, like when Moses turns the water of the Nile into blood. Presumably, there's some point at which that stops. It isn't like all the oceans of the world turn into blood. So trying to understand exactly where that is can sometimes feel strange and arbitrary. But this seems like a very concrete place of just metabolism. Like when you turn normal food and wine into your body and blood, that's the demarcation point, that you are turned into the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. Second, in terms of it being held by extraordinary ministers or received in the hand, no. So again, as long as it remains visibly the Eucharist, that you have the visible species of bread and wine, Christ is present there, whether in a tabernacle or a monstrance or the hand of a priest or the hand of an extraordinary minister or the hand of a layperson, and so on. And this is how you can have things like, the early Christians like St. Tarcisius, who is a layman, seemingly like a teenage boy, bringing the Eucharist to the sick. And St. Ambrose has a funeral oration on the death of his brother, in which he mentions that his brother, before he had become baptized, was on a boat, and the boat began to sink. And someone on the boat had the Eucharist reserved. And it says in the translations, like, in a napkin. I think that's a handkerchief. And so, they're carrying the Eucharist with them, and it being reserved on the boat because they obviously can't make it to a priest on this boat journey. And so they grab the Eucharist and they get off the boat. So, they don't even they touch the Eucharist in the so-called handkerchief. Because they're showing so much respect, they don't even directly touch the Eucharist. It remains Jesus throughout that. So these kind of indications we have from the early Christians support our view that when Jesus says, "This is my body," not just my body is present here, but this is my body, that as long as it is his body.
What do you think, Hannah?
Okay, so
Go ahead.
so how come, like, if we have the Eucharist at our disposal, pretty much, there's a lot of them. I go to a large church now.
Sure.
How come we choose to take, I guess, relics to someone who's sick rather than something that seems to be so, I guess, at hand?
Oh, I see.
Makes
So
sense.
why do we not bring the Eucharist to the sick instead of bringing relics to the sick?
Yeah, the high school next door has I thought it was so funny because I'm new to the Catholicism thing, but it's they have brought this St. John Paul's ski jacket, and I thought, what? That does not seem right. But you have the Eucharist in your hand, you have Jesus Christ, and you took the ski jacket. So I don't know. I just thought it was silly.
First of all, I am fascinated by. During the break, I'm going to be looking this up. Who's got John Paul's ski jacket? Because I want to. Somewhere in Tennessee, John Paul's ski jacket is there. But I have to.
JP2 High School.
JP2 High School. I will be looking that up. But the reason I kind of stepped in, Hannah, is we have to take this break. Can you hang on through the break, and we'll find out what Joe thinks about bringing the ski jacket rather than the Eucharist to the sick in your parish. All right, thanks, Hannah. Hang on. We got to take a very quick break. I'm going to be checking on the ski jacket, and I will report back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
What is the Catholic Church? Everyone seems to have an opinion, but the Church never quite fits into the boxes people make for it. In The Faith Unboxed, author Andrew Petiprin looks at some of the most common boxes people put the Catholic Church in and explains why they don't fit. In doing so, he brings us closer to what the Church really is, the institution founded by Christ. Order The Faith Unboxed today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Hescmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
The stigmata, the appearance of Christ's wounds on ordinary believers. Is it real or fake? What's the evidence? And if real, what could God's reason be for causing this? In God's Wounds, author John Clark offers what may be the most thorough, honest, and faithful reckoning with the stigmata ever written, examining the evidence and making sense of it both medically and spiritually. Order God's Wounds today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore.
It's not that I doubted. I wasn't doubting. I just wanted to find out more about it. Hannah in Tennessee told us John Paul II's ski jacket is there in a prep school in Tennessee, and it's a relic. All of which is true. Pope John Paul II Preparatory School in Hendersonville, Tennessee, near Nashville. They've had it since 2005. It only became a relic when he was canonized a saint, but it is there. Hannah, I am. First of all, you made my day by sharing that knowledge.
Good.
But does it bother you that his ski jacket is a relic?
Well, okay. Yeah, just coming from someone who's Protestant, relics are still they're still coming around to me. So, yeah, it just seems funny because I'm like, he bought this ski jacket probably at a store.
Yeah.
So it has some, powers to it. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning. I've been following your Shameless Popery on the relics thing. So
Oh, good. I was about to say, I did do a relic episode recently. And, what do you make of things like Acts 19, where they bring handkerchiefs and aprons that were touched to the body of St. Paul to the sick, and people are healed of diseases, and evil spirits come out of them? This is, for those listening at home, it's Acts 19, 11 to 12.
So it's very biblical.
It's it's a very interesting point, and I guess it doesn't seem so silly when you read it in the Bible, but then when you use our everyday.
There it is.
We were talking about this over the break. I get it completely. I feel this way even about paintings. Like if somebody in a painting looks like they're in the Middle Ages or look like they're in the time of Jesus, then it's not weird for them to have a halo. But if they're just like walking down the street in regular 21st century clothes, there is something that feels very strange about that. And I think that's actually a problem of our age. Like in the Middle Ages, they painted religious scenes in their time and place because they realized, like, well, yeah, sure, these things happened in the first century, but this was also real life. So they painted them the way they knew real life to look. And we're so worried about trying to get like the ancient world just right, that we kind of forget, like, yeah, sanctity doesn't stop. There are still saints. There's still this call. And that means there's still relics. Cy and I were talking during the break. It's going to be weird when you have the relics of saints, but everything has brand names on it now. So, you know, a ski jacket from the Pope is already sort of that's very modern feeling. When it's like a North Face puffer jacket, that's going to feel 20 times weirder. But that's partly just the reality of what it is to be holy in the modern world, that today's saints are probably wearing some stuff that has tags and labels and everything else, because most things have tabs and tags and labels and everything else. St. Carlo Acutis, you know, has like Adidas, and you're just like, that's weird. But it's a reminder of the modern reality we're all living in, I guess.
Yeah, brands took over the world about 100 years ago, and so now we're going to have saints with brands. I mean, I think Carlo Acutis, he actually is wearing brand. I mean, his body, his corpse is wearing branded clothing. If I recall, like his shoes are, I think they are Adidas. So, yeah, we're just going to have to get used to that. But that is actually
all day I dream about sanctity. That's what it stands for.
Is that what? I was not aware, Joe. But that is the scandal of Christianity, isn't it? That it's the scandal of particularity, that in his ski jacket, he was a saint. In his Adidas, he was a saint, just as St. Paul walking around, he looked like any other, or I mean, I don't want to, we could go to Jesus, but I'm trying to keep it to sinners like us. These sinners in their regular everyday clothing, they are the stuff of heaven, and they were right in our midst.
Yeah. So I would just say to your earlier question, we should bring relics and we should bring the Eucharist to the sick. It's actually a little easier to bring relics as an ordinary person. You don't have to be an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. You can just, if you have a relic, you can bring it to the person, because we want to show greater reverence for the Eucharist. But it's very clear, even from Acts 19 itself, that random people are just bringing things touched to relics to the sick.
Okay, so that is like my deeper question right there, I guess, is that so people can't just take a Eucharist that has been changed and bring it home and put it in their house. Like,
not without permission. Not without permission. That's right. And a lot of this is about making sure you're not doing anything unholy or treating the Eucharist in a disrespectful way.
Oh. I see. Okay, because, when you said, like, you can take a relic, anyone can take a relic, but not anyone can take the Eucharist, that's where the question of, like, when does it not become Jesus, or it just doesn't make sense to me that why somebody couldn't take what a priest has already blessed. I mean, and then, if we receive it in our hands, like, why can't I just take that to the sick and then, you need, like, it didn't change?
There's actually a rule about that. You're going to need a little container for that, but you can take it to the sick.
Called the pyx. Yeah, I would say this. Number one, if you feel called to bring the Eucharist to the sick, there's almost always a need for more people to do this. And it's a beautiful way of encountering Christ in the Eucharist and encountering Christ in the sick and in the elderly. So it's a beautiful spiritual experience. I don't know if you heard, there's a woman who called in last hour who she's been kind of called into this. If that's something you discern you're called to, it can be a wonderful way of growing in your own Eucharistic devotion. But we do there's like steps of, like, there's training and everything else to make sure you're not approaching the Eucharist in an irreverent sort of way. And there's much less kind of prep work that you need for something like having relics in your home. Basically, you just make an intention to treat the relic with respect and devotion, and you're good to go. And then in my experience, people tend to be very open-handed. You're not allowed to sell or buy relics. But this means that if you meet someone who has a relic and you say, oh, I have a devotion to that saint, they'll often say, would you like this relic for your house? And they'll hand you a relic. This happens with some frequency in my experience. So I would just say, because the relics are touched to the body of a saint, or in some cases are the bodies of saints, whereas the Eucharist is literally Jesus himself, we treat the bodies of saints, we treat those things touched to the body of saints with a certain degree of reverence, but not the same degree of reverence with which we treat Jesus' own body and blood.
Okay, Hannah?
Okay.
Have we ever,
Yes.
I know you've called when Joe's on before. Have we ever asked you if you would like a book about Jesus or a book about Peter?
No, I love this. I try to collect them all. So
All right, which one would you?
I don't have any of this.
Would you like a book about Jesus or a book?
Let's do Peter.
All right.
Hannah, I was already really enjoying our conversation, and without even knowing it, you took this to the next level because this is an ongoing.
You made Joe so happy. Yeah,
Yes.
I wrote the book about Jesus. He wrote the book about Peter, and now you are going to get a Joe Hescmeyer book called Pope Peter, Guardian for Our Times, or something like that. I don't know what's the title of it, Joe. What's the title of the book?
Defending the Church's Most Distinctive Doctrine in a Time of Crisis.
Yeah.
That's the subtitle.
Hannah, it's been great talking with you. I really do hope you will keep calling. Hannah's always a wonderful call, but call up and tell me that your local high school has a relic of a saint, and it's a ski jacket from Pope John Paul. That's winning. That's a winning call right there. Hang on, give us your address, and we'll send you a book about Peter. Hannah, thank you. Let's go to Newton, Kansas.
No, I love Newton, Kansas.
It says Kansas, too. This better be Kansas. Hi, Eric. You got a question for Joe?
Hi, Cy and Joe. Yeah, this is Eric, and I'm in Kansas.
All right. So, Joe, are you in Kansas? You're in Missouri right now.
I'm in Missouri, but I've been to Newton, Kansas. I like Newton, Kansas as well. There's a great Italian place I ate way too much food at one time.
A fascinating story, Joe.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for
wanted to
sharing
give
that. Oh
the
my
credit
gosh.
it was due.
Oh my
to Newton,
gosh,
Kansas.
that was fascinating. I don't.
At least I know what state he's in.
All right, Eric, go ahead with your question.
Genova.
Well,
That's
I've
I think
talked
the name
to
of it.
Joe on Facebook before.
All right.
Oh, wonderful.
We're actually friends on Facebook.
Oh, I'm so glad it's not enemies. I wasn't sure where this was going. But all right, Eric, go ahead and ask your friend Joe a question.
I'm a cradle Catholic, and I firmly believe that all Catholics are traditionalists.
Huh.
But I keep running into, it's part of our three legs to the stool, tradition.
Right. Yes, sir.
So we're all traditional. So, but I keep running into rigid traditionalists, and some of them have said some things that I didn't quite believe. One of them is that during Mass you focus on the tabernacle, and I say you focus on the altar, at least during the liturgy of the Eucharist. That's point number one, or question number one. What should we focus on? And number two is my dad was an extraordinary minister, and when he talked about it, he loved doing that so much that it caused him to have tears.
Oh,
because it was
beautiful.
that meaningful to him. And I run into rigid traditionalists that will only go to a priest to receive communion. What do you say about that?
All right, two questions for you, Joe.
So, in terms of where the focus should be, ideally it's on the action at the altar, which is, I think when you say the altar, it seems like what you're talking about. So Christ is reposed in the Eucharist in the tabernacle, and so we should honor and reverence him there. But we don't want to miss the sacrificial action going on at the altar, because otherwise you can focus on so take an extreme. Somebody who is focused on the tabernacle to the point of being oblivious to the altar, it wouldn't matter that Mass is going on. That seems like obviously a red flag. If the Mass, the Eucharistic sacrifice, is the source and summit of our faith, as the Second Vatican Council says, then if your understanding of Christ's presence excludes the sacrificial dimension, something big is missing. And this is one of the things Vatican II, I think, is trying to help teach people, is that the Mass as sacrifice matters. Like, what is the difference between a communion service and a Mass? Well, in a communion service, you're taking the hosts out of the tabernacle, and you say the prayers and you distribute the already consecrated hosts. It's not a Mass, and it's not of the same efficaciousness as a Mass because it's missing the sacrificial action of the Mass combined to it. It's still good. It is still, like, if you are not able to make it to Mass, a Eucharistic service is great. But the sacrifice of the Mass being represented to the Father is of such tremendous spiritual value that the Church labels it the source and summit. This is the number one thing in Christianity. This is where everything else kind of flows to and from. So in that sense, that should be where our attention is. Nevertheless, someone from a devotional perspective might want to call to mind that Christ is already here present in the tabernacle, and that's great, that's wonderful. But there's a reason our liturgical gestures and postures change. So, for instance, when you're going in and out of Mass, you will genuflect in the direction of the tabernacle. But then, like during the liturgy itself, you instead bow towards the altar. And this distinction is telling us something about where the liturgical spotlight, as it were, is. The second thing is on receiving from the ordinary minister of Holy Communion or an extraordinary minister. And here, I mean, there's nothing in terms of validity that's at issue here, but I don't think there's any need to, it's good that the ordinary minister of Holy Communion is the priest. And also, I mean, a deacon is, I believe, I'd have to go back and check. I believe a deacon is also considered an ordinary minister, but anyone else is an extraordinary minister. I'd have to actually check. I can't remember offhand if deacons are ordinary or extraordinary. But you want to have the connection with holy orders, ideally, but it's not necessary for anything like validity. So it's fine to have, a layperson presenting communion and, offering communion in that way. In the same way that even in the early church, as we've already talked about a few times now, lay people would bring communion to the sick. But it was never the default option. The default option was always to receive from the priest. So I don't think there's anything wrong with someone saying, I want to keep the ordinary minister, and then only use an extraordinary minister if circumstances require it. It would be strange if they said, I'm literally not going to allow Jesus to come into my body because the person distributing him is a layperson. That would be a strange kind of clericalism. But barring that, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a preference for receiving from a priest. What say you, Eric?
I think there's a lot of them. That they would rather not receive than receive from an extraordinary minister.
I think it's worth probably asking if that's the case, because I think if that is, that would be a problem.
Yeah. I agree.
Eric? Okay, I just double checked. Canon 910. Deacons are ordinary ministers of Holy Communion. I just couldn't remember for sure. Didn't want to misspeak.
They're extraordinary people, but they're ordinary ministers. Eric, I got to take the break. We'll be right back with more questions on the Eucharist for Joe Hescmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. I invite you to listen to Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. On Bible in a Year, we're reading all the way from Genesis through Revelation, plus time for explanations and reflections to help us go deeper into God's Word, encounter His voice, and learn how to live life through the lens of Scripture.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Lots of wonderful callers today. Thank you to everyone who has called. Joe Hescmeyer is our guest. You can get Joe's books and a whole bunch of other stuff, lots of other books, over at shop.catholic.com, where we've got big sales going on right now. And you can check out Joe's podcast, Shameless Popery, just by just type in Shameless Popery in whatever machine you're using. Your toaster will find it. And you can watch his YouTube channel. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And how many times a week are you coming out with new content for Shameless Popery now?
Two. I try to do a short episode on Tuesdays and a long episode on Thursday.
Yeah, I like the Tuesday ones. 888-318-7884 is the number here. Let me get to the calls, though, because we got lots of folks on the line. Bill in Oklahoma, listening on St. Michael Radio. Glad to have you here, Bill. Go ahead with your question.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Si, that I thoroughly enjoy you and your program and all your guests.
Oh, thank you.
It's a tremendous blessing for me.
Oh.
Secondly, my goal is to surpass John in popularity and calls from Oklahoma.
Oh, well, by all means,
perfect.
Have at it. Let me ask you a quick question before you ask. I just want to ask you a quick question, Bill, before you ask Joe his question, the question you have for him. Would you prefer a book about Jesus or Peter?
Well, let me share something with you, and I think that'll answer the question. Okay.
Yes.
Background. Many, many years ago, I had a youth ministry, Catholic youth ministry, that went all across the country. I was privileged to have several meetings, personal meetings with Mother Angelica.
Wow.
When she was alive. She also put me in touch with Father John Hardin, which I had many meetings with him in Detroit, and was blessed to be invited, our program, to be part of World Youth Day when St. John Paul was
in Denver.
Pope in Denver in 1993.
Yeah.
So that in itself right there should put me way beyond John here in Oklahoma, okay?
You know what? I'm going to tell you right now, Bill, I don't even remember John. I've forgotten him completely. He's nothing to me.
As far as I knows, John is just Christine in Florida.
I don't even know who this John in Oklahoma is of whom you speak, Bill. He means nothing to me.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm so glad I've accomplished everything with this one phone call.
Right.
And I thought maybe that God would open the doors for that to happen. But this was many years ago. I'm 72 years old now. I'm retired. The youth ministry was called Say Yes to Jesus. And we did conferences all across the country in Catholic high schools and auditoriums and things of that nature. And it was a wonderful time for me. Met some wonderful people.
Praise
through
God.
EWTN and many other things. But
wait, you met wonderful people at EWTN?
Wow. We're about to get taken off the air because
I'm sorry.
wants to start
I'm
some
sorry.
fights.
I feel terrible now. I just couldn't resist. You know, of course, we love everybody at EWTN. Well, almost everybody.
Well, I guess the biggest wonderful thing I had was with Mother Angelica. I had a meeting with her. 2 meetings, actually, personally, and I was in athletics through high school and college. I played baseball at the University of Arkansas, and when I met with her, when she came into the room, when we were visiting, she was such a force, and I told her, I said, you know what, Mother Angelica, if I was playing baseball and I had to handpick a team, I would want you to be the catcher to guard home, and she just got a real thrill out of that, But
she'd probably have her cleats up when somebody came in. But
yeah, exactly. But anyway,
Bill, go ahead, Bill, with your question because we're getting near the end. But go ahead.
Sure, I understand.
Sure.
I have done lots of research myself on our faith and our background and our history on the early church and on the Eucharist, and I've had conversations with people to try to convince them about the real presence. And, you know, the one thing that after going through all the scriptural stuff and the history stuff, I finally got to this one point where I asked this gentleman, I said, you know what, if you believe that Christ could turn water into wine, if you believe he could remove demons from an individual, if you believe that God could make a donkey speak, why would you have problem in him turning the bread and wine into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of his son Jesus?
Wow.
Yep.
And, you know, and he couldn't say much, you know. And it was like when I got past all the scriptural stuff and the history and all that, I just hit him with this, and I said, you know, if God could turn the Red Sea into blood, you know, and do all of those things, you know, raise people from the dead, why would you doubt that he would have the power to do that with the bread and wine and turn it into the body, blood, soul, and divinity?
What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, Gregory of Nyssa makes a pretty similar argument. When he talks about the body of Christ, he points out Jesus' very body doesn't stick to the rules of nature. There's something miraculous about his body in the sense that he's virgin born. He has only a biological mother, but he's a male. And so he points out two things, that Jesus' body is miraculous and that Jesus' words are efficacious. Like, he speaks and the universe comes into existence. And so you go all throughout the Bible and look at how many times our Lord says something and things happen. I mean, you've mentioned several of the examples right now. He tells the paralyzed man, rise and walk, and what does he do? He rises and walks. And so as a result, you've got these two things, you put them together, and you say, okay, so here's Jesus. He's got a miraculous body, and at his word, miraculous things happen. And so it only stands to reason that the Eucharist is at least plausible. You can't just write the Eucharist off by saying, well, that would be a miracle, because, yeah, of course it is. And it's the kind of miracle that God does. And so as a result, you know, he says, like, your sins are forgiven. He does all kinds of transformations in the Bible through the power of his word. So I would look to all of those things and say, as a result of one thing after another, all throughout the Old Testament, all throughout the New Testament, and we can say with a great deal of confidence, we can take him at his word in what he says.
Do you pair that, though, Joe, with the notion that there seems to also be a preparation for this particular miracle all throughout Scripture? That it's not just that we could say there are lots of miracles, why not this one? But that this one in particular, you can point to the Jewish experience and say, it all seems to prepare for this.
Yeah, Brant Petrie does a great job when he's going through the Jewish roots of the Eucharist. But I would add to those even things like go all the way back to Genesis. If you've got a Protestant who says it's ridiculous to imagine you can eat this thing and it's going to make you spiritually well, point to Adam and Eve and say, but you believe that they ate this thing and became spiritually sick, that original sin and death came into the world through disobedient, unfaithful eating, but faithful consumption of the Eucharist doesn't bring spiritual life? Because one of the things Gregory says is that, as a good doctor does, the bandage is in the shape of the wound. You don't want a bandage that doesn't cover the exact wound. And so our wound is at the level of body and soul and comes to us through this dishonorable, disobedient eating. And so Christ heals us body and soul, and one of the ways he does it is through a reverent eating of his sacramental body and blood in the Eucharist.
Bill, we're right at the end, so I'm going to say thank you very much for the call. You are now our very best friend from Oklahoma. We have no better friends from Oklahoma, not even...
We're going to gather them together in a little OK corral.
That's not in Oklahoma.
No, but OK is, well, you know.
I think, isn't Oklahoma the one where the wind comes sweeping down the plain, or is that a different state?
Yeah, that's where they say everything is up to date in Kansas City. Also not in Oklahoma, though.
Okay. Sorry to the callers we didn't get. I'm so glad there was so much interest in the Eucharist, however. That is, and also some really inspiring calls today about love and respect for the Eucharist, especially from people who are serving or about to serve as Eucharistic ministers. It was very inspiring.
Yes.
Check out everything Joe Hescmeyer does. Shameless Popery is where you can find his work. Joe Hescmeyer, thank you. I really enjoyed the 2 hours.
Oh, my pleasure.
And that will do it for us. We'll see you again tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.